Welcome to the Natural Parents Podcast, where we will cover all things faith, health, family, and wealth through a biblical perspective of putting things in life that matter most back into order. We're reminded in Matthew 6:33, where Jesus said, "But seek first the kingdom of God and all of his righteousness, and all of these things will be added unto you." Join us each week as we focus on what truly matters most in this life and passing those values on to the next generation. This is the Natural Parents Podcast with Ryan and Abbie Hewkin.
I'm excited to talk about raising kingdom entrepreneurs and just cultivating our kids to really think about how to create and steward and find a need and fill that need.
Oh, that's really good.
Yeah.
That makes me think of something about my heart in this inside our house is to teach our children the idea that they're paid on the value they bring, not just for the time that they're committing to the workplace, right? And so, again, people have heard me talk about this guy before, but his name is Jim Rohn. Like, I don't care if you even don't want to be an entrepreneur, you don't want to pursue anything in business, anything like that. If you would just listen to his YouTubes, like, he's all about personal development because, yes, he teaches people that have jobs in business and sales or own their own business or different things like that. But he's oftentimes just talking about his whole idea is that anything in life gets better if you just focus on you, if you just make yourself a little bit better. And so his idea here is like, you know, he's talking in the 70s, 80s, and 90s or when his audios are from, but he's talking, you know, in this one, he's like, so you get paid $4 an hour. He's like, is it possible that you could create and make yourself more valuable, like twice as valuable? Could you get paid $8 an hour in that concept, right? And he's like, the answer is yes. Like, unequivocally, it's yes. We just got to work on you to create that. And so, like, we've started trying to figure this out. It's like, how do we set up our household, you know, chores or things that the kiddos are wanting to do in a way that they're not just starting to program their mind towards like, well, I gave this much time, so I earned this much dollars. But it's like, hey, no, I provided this level of value and that was worth this much time or this much money to someone. Because again, for me, the idea is really rooted in the great equalizer in all things is time. We all only have 24 hours in a day, right? How are some people able to accomplish and achieve so much in it, right? And I'm not just talking about monetary value. I'm talking about the heartfelt and the mission mind of so many entrepreneurial ventures. What need is there in the marketplace? What need is there in God's kingdom that our children may have come into this world purely with the purpose of pursuing that thing or solving that problem?
Yeah, and kind of going back to talking about, you know, being paid for time or doing something, the value, we have talked about that we don't pay our kids for the common things, like you make your bed, you clean your room, you feed the animals, you do all of these things without being paid, because some things you just have to do.
Sure.
And nobody is going to pay you for doing those types of things.
Sure.
So, you know, when it comes to that, and I think that relates a lot to entrepreneurship.
Sure.
They're still providing value by making their bed and cleaning their room and taking care of the animals, but not everything is going to be rewarded right then.
Sure.
Their payment may come when we are able to eat as a family the animals that we, have raised and have worked hard for. And the same goes for entrepreneurship. Just because you're providing value doesn't mean that will be rewarded immediately.
Ouch.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, sometimes it's delayed. Sometimes you have to stay the course. Sometimes you have to put in a lot of value and time and effort on the front end. And so I think that also instills in them a little bit more of delayed gratification and work and grit and all of the things that it takes, because entrepreneur is not for the faint-hearted. It's hard work mentally, if not just as much as all of the other.
Well, and again, say maybe you don't think you yourself as a parent or your children are super focused in that area, or maybe that's not a strength that you see God's given them or anything like that. There's this other concept I love that's called an intrapreneur. Like, okay, well, what if they could align themselves in such a way? What if they worked on themselves in such a way to become the kind of a person that a place that's in alignment with a mission that they have, that they could come on board there and provide a ton of value, right? And
Yes.
be paid well for it, right? And be making a difference because they're in this piece of that puzzle. But I think that even comes down to like just the mindset around work.
Yeah.
Like I feel like a lot of today's generation, if you talk to like our grandparents and, you know, even parents' generation, there's like, oh, you know, today's generation, which I think, well, yes. But I also think every generation of generation past complains about the generation that they raised, mind you. Yeah. Right? So it's like,
they don't ever self-check.
Let's talk about that. Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's a concept that, you know, you'll hear them say, well, they just don't know how to work or this, that, the other thing. And it's like, okay, possibly. And again, a lot of conversation we had there. But what if we all just aligned our hearts with a mission, whatever it is? Like, if you don't like the job that you're currently in, you could change it, right? Like, you could come in alignment with a different one that's more on mission, more, you know, I don't mean to be sunshine, sunshine, unicorns, and rainbows about this type of stuff. But I just think that you can create that life that you long for. You just have to kind of take that mindset towards it. And so, again, maybe the entrepreneurial word is averse to people because they're like, hey, I don't want to do that. Okay, well, hear me out. You can still work, you know, self-develop, become that entrepreneur. You can create and cultivate that value set mindset in our children, right, as they're growing up, with a mindset towards like, hey, God made work, so it can't be that bad. This pastor, Joby Martin, I love to listen to. He says 3 things God set it up the world for men. He's usually talking to men when he talks about this, but he gave man a will to obey, a work to enjoy, and a woman to love. And like, if we have those things, let's go. Mm-hmm. You've got it all, right? And so I think sometimes our mindset towards our work becomes very negative in nature, and then we might be modeling that for our children. Yeah. And so then they're like, okay, well, I'll give my 8 hours a day or my 40 hours a week in exchange for this amount of money. And I just, my hope and my desire with, we say faith, health, family, and then wealth, that wealth pillar is rooted in that. Let's create something inside your family, or maybe for your children. Like, maybe your purpose, mom or dad, is to do the hard thing to set up the next step for your children to be able to actually pursue that entrepreneurial passion that they have, that God's laid on their heart. How do we continue to cultivate that within them?
Right. And I think that even just at a young age, letting your kids create and dream up this new business, right? I'm trying to remember what our kids had created signs for. I think they wanted to sell their stuff, and they went and they got a stack of printer paper, all of their markers, and they were doing rainbows, and they were, how do I write this? This was like a couple of years ago.
Sure.
We lived in the camper, and they were making signs. They're like, all right, we're going to hang it on the stop sign. We're going to hang it on the mailbox. And it was pouring that day. And I'm like, we can't hang. Like, I don't want to even crush you.
All 4 cars that come by.
Yes, to come to their yard sale or whatever it is. And I think that if we just allow them to be creative, to think, to problem solve, like, okay, what do you see that is a problem that you can solve for, right? Because that's business in general. And encouraging them in that, and helping them name it, and helping them think through the systems of it, and just giving them that mindset. No, are they going to actually create a business at 7 years old? Maybe, but probably not. So let them do lemonade stands. We are doing a lemonade stand with our kids and our best friends' kids, and the purpose is not just for the profit of the lemonade. It's for a greater mission, right? We're going to talk about our expo and advertise for that and just different things. And so at that same time, it's a good opportunity to talk to your kids about profit, right? Sure. So our kids are going to be like, okay, I got $1 for that cup of lemonade. How do I want to spend it? The good time for a reality check is to be like, all right, but that cup cost us 50 cents. So really your profit is only 50 cents. And what are we going to do with that? Because that's what really sets them up to not view business as just profit, but as a tool, to use.
How can we leverage that profit? Again, something I've heard said is like, I think we're called, especially in this realm of pursuing entrepreneurship, if God's put something on your heart, like he's going to bless it. There's really no question about that. It's just us doing the hard work of the kind of walk it out piece. Mm-hmm. But it's like all for the mindset of we are called to, in my opinion, use money to love people, and in such a way we're serving God, right? Like the parable of the talents is taught about in the book of Matthew. And there's these 5 guys come to their master, or 3 guys come to their master. One gets 5 talents, one gets 2, one gets 1. The 5 and the 2 go out and they put what God deposited, or what in the story, the parable from Jesus is that the boss, if you will, invested this into these 2 gentlemen, and they took it and they took risk. That's where a lot of people stop right there. They're like, wait, there's risk involved, I'm out. And then they took it, they invested it, and they got a return. And God measured not anything other than the fact that they got return, right? 5 guy brought back 5 more, so he had 10. 2 guy brought back 2 more, so he had 4. But then there was the 1, and the 1 guy took it and was fearful. God deposited a 1 talent. In this case, it's equal to a sum of money as the story goes. But in my heart, it's like there's a gift inside each and every one of our children that God deposited. It might be that they might be the next professional baseball player. They might be the next world-changing entrepreneur. They might be the person that, hey, I'm going to be this in my family. I'm going to be the person that stops this generational curse in my family because this happened and this happened and this happened, but I'm going to be the one it stops with. And whatever it is, we have to be willing to cultivate that and encourage them to invest that gift that God gave them back into the, what I say, kingdom marketplace. And so if we'll do that, God will say, well done, my good and faithful servant. But to the 1 guy, he took his thing that God gave him and he just went over here and he hid it. He put it, as other scripture will say, underneath, lit his candle and covered it up, so he didn't let the world see it. He never took the risk with the gift that God gave him, and he got no return. And God was like, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. Essentially in the parable. And so for me, it's such a reminder. It's like, if God's given you something, parents, he's given you children, continue to invest in them in whatever way possible. Like just having this conversation today, reading those books we've talked about in the past, like whatever it is, just continue to push your children towards using and leveraging the gifts that God's given them, but also the dreams that they might have. Like, I never want to be the person that diminishes my children's pursuit of something. Like you said that, like it's a rainy day, they're making signs, not a solid business plan, right? Putting signs up on the stop sign on the back county road. But hey, I appreciate the zeal. And so then it's just a matter of how do we guide and direct that into a passionate, purpose for them to truly pursue. And that's where, I think a big role that we have as parents with our children to really invest in that wealth pillar concept. I mean, we live in a first world country. We live in the greatest country in the world. We are wealthy. There's no question, across all measures of other worldly aspects of things. What I'm talking about when we say wealth pillar is how can we create something that pushes back darkness in this world, leverages a tool like money for God's goodness.
Hey guys, we want you to come hang out with us this summer at the Natural Parents Expo.
It's going to be July 26th in Chesterfield, Missouri. Get your tickets at thenaturalparents.com. This is the Natural Parents Podcast with Ryan and Abbie Hewkin.
Yeah, and I mean, with that, we've talked about money habits and spenders and savers and all of that. And this is also where the foundation of our kids' spending habits and saving habits can be set. And I've seen I think it's like a piggy bank or it's a bank of some kind, and it has different little slots in it. And it's like, okay, this amount I'm going to be able to spend. This amount I'm going to save. This amount I'm going to give. This amount I'm going to reinvest.
Sure.
And it just teaches our kids to switch from, I have all of this to spend, to, no, I'm going to give that away. Church, charity, missionaries, different things. I'm going to do that. I can spend this amount, I'm going to save this amount, and this amount I'm going to go and maybe put it back into my business to make it better.
Sure.
Or, you know, start a new business or different things like that. And I think whenever you lay that foundation from an early stage and really let them have a lemonade stand and do all of that with their profit.
Sure.
Make sure you do, you know, humble them real quick with the expenses.
Yeah.
You know, revenue is not profit. But I really do think that doing that at an early age really gets them to think appropriately when it comes to that. And then when it's big money and not just monopoly,
Sure.
then maybe they'll do it better.
Well, so on that concept of stewardship, like I've heard this, and we've talked about this, I think, on the podcast before, where people will often say, if I just had, I think it's like something like 20 or 30% more. People always are in that thought. They're just like, well, if I just had this much more, right? And the conviction question here is, well, if you were God, would you give you more money? Mm-hmm. Because going back to the parable is that God gave to them, right? And then they went and did with what God gave them. The worthy servants, right? The good and faithful servants did that. And the one who didn't do what God had put on his heart for him to do, he got too afraid of making a mistake or losing it or anything like that. And he just buried it into the earth and hid it away so that he wouldn't lose it. And God's like, that's not why I gave you that, right? And so this is something I'm not calling you out. We've discussed this before, but you'll say something like, well, I'm not creative. And I'm like, well, you're made in the image of God, and God, the first thing God ever tells us about God is that he's created. He is creative. He says in Genesis chapter 1, he said, and God created, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So why did God tell us this? Like, of all the things he could have started with, that's the first thing he tells us. It must be pretty important. And so if he's creative and created all of this, and his like cornerstone of creation is us as human beings, like we are his masterpiece, right? He said his total tone changed. He says, let us make them in our image. Everything else was like, he just did it. He said, you know, creatures of the ground, let them come forth, right? Creatures of the sea, let them come forth. But when he got to man, it was like, let us make them in our image. And so if God's creative, then we are creative. And so how do we cultivate that creativity in our children so that they can create something and really push forward against the darkness of this world? And that's like, for us, that's this concept of the natural parents, right? That's why we want to have an expo. It's not just for the sake of getting together and hearing some really amazing people speak, have some awesome vendors, maybe shop some natural and, you know, holistic ideas and stuff like that. But it's like, let's come together and build something that I'm not even sure yet what God wants to do with it. But I really believe it's something that's going to push against some of the big dark issues that are, or at least come from, a broken family in this world. Because I don't know, I always say that's a molehill I'll die on all the time, is that I think you could trace every bad, broken, you know, emergency room issue, if you will, right? Like, be it human trafficking to divorce to, you know, all these different concepts that we're facing as families in modern day world, they could all be traced to just that breakdown of the family unit.
Somewhere in the family tree.
Exactly, somewhere. And I think there's spiritual realms to that and stuff like that. So the hopes with the Natural Parents Conference is that, right? This whole podcast, why are we doing this? Let's get a community of like-minded families together and push back against darkness.
Yeah, just growing together as a family, but also thinking differently, because, you know, we're used to just hearing 9 to 5, all of the things, and that is fine. Like you said, there's entrepreneurs who are powerful people who actually move a mission forward.
Sure.
But let's just cultivate that way of thinking around all things faith, health, family, and wealth, and come together in a group with like-minded people.
I love it. Yes, we should do that.
Awesome. So if you guys have either started a small business with your kids or your kids have ideas, I want to hear about them. So please post them in the Natural Parents Facebook group so that we can come along, cheer along, and support you in any way that we can. From the bottom of our hearts, we want to say thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with someone you know and leave a review. By doing so, we're able to grow this community of amazing people just like you and raise a generation of children that know God and do His will on earth. We'll see you next time.
This is the Natural Parents Podcast with Ryan and Abbie Hewkin.